Destins. This is Kyle D, better known as Ridemyavatar, and today we're going to be going over the Bt-07 tier list. What decks I think are going to be rising to the top, and what decks are just going to flop during this meta. I know there are some restrictions that makes it a little different than our normal BT format, but than Japanese, I would say. But without further ado, let's dive into it, boys and girls. First off, I think Green Hybrid is one of the best decks of this format. I think it is going to be really putting in some damage going forwards, and I really think you're going to enjoy it. The ability of Ancient Kabuterimon being able to clear out security by your hybrid swinging in and killing a Digimon, it really does help out, because especially with the piercing and everything like that, I think it's a very solid tier 1 deck as is. Let's talk about it. Blue-green Rookie Rush hasn't seen much play since, Black has gotten those powerful options. Secure Control was one of the best decks, and it just falls flat. I really think that it gets pushed down. It still can snag wins. I don't know. I would think it's low tier 3 because it can still snag wins, but with everybody switching over to tamer-focused decks, it does not matter as much as it used to with the other decks. So keep that in mind. We have Shine Greymon Hybrid. This deck is definitely a threat and a half to deal with. I gotta say, there's not many decks that can just build enough tamer presence and then just use those tamers utility wise without having to go in the hybrid aspect. Shine Greymon just needs one pretty much ultimate to go into its requirements, and it's very easy to achieve that. And with the consistency yellow has with its security, I think being able to pull Shine Greymon out of security is really good. Being able to rest and just clear board state is nasty. He gets bigger. He's just a very powerful Digimon to see. Then we have Diaboromon, aka Purple Rookie Rush. Rookie Rushes, I'm gonna just put down here. They're just very struggling this format, especially as I mentioned, tamers are the hyper focus of this time around, so everybody's going to have more tamers, so it means more options for you to digivolve and choke them back for one, because one tamer equals one digi-evolution for usually two. So even they choke you for one, you choke them one for back, and they can't keep up that consistency, which is really the big headline for that kind of style of play. Now, Lilith Loop definitely got the nerf with Mega Digimon Fusion, but with the ability that they have without having to worry about you with having 60% rate, still a viable option with the Eismons in there. I think the deck still is consistent enough to play out. There's not losing out on one card is not as bad as everybody else losing out on a couple cards. You know what I mean? They all kind of just lost a few cards with the restriction list, but hey, we're gonna keep going forwards. We have yellow security control. Same thing. I think the minusing DP puts it ahead, and it's still security control. It loses out on many viable options. I mean, sorry, not security control. Rookie Rush. Sorry, it's not security control. Rookie Rush really is struggling because, as I said, for the other two, same thing applies. Everybody's playing enough tamers that digi-evolutions are now easier to achieve, and it's not even funny. You hit into security, they get a tamer. It's like, okay, now we don't have answers for it. Lord Nightmon definitely comes back with a vengeance now, because a lot of the other decks are now a little neutered enough where it's not terrible for it. There's not heavy, like with Ice Wall kind of restricted now, Lord Nightmon isn't worried as much going forwards. It can now build its wide board. Ice Wall can't shut them down because it's just one Ice Wall now. You have to time that right, and if you can't keep Ice Walling them turn after turn, they're just building, one Ice Wall will not be enough to shut down this, which is huge for this deck, because that was the gatekeeper, was the Ice Walls. And blue definitely got neutered a bit to be having that issue. So I think this is a really good solid point. I give it a tier 2. But let's talk about it. The death of this deck. I'm going to be quite honest with you. It's about there. Security Control definitely got hurt with the hit with Reinforced Memory Booster, and that's really it. It got hit hard that way, and it's already going into a format where everybody's playing a slower paced style deck that literally builds up tamers that are just going to become your Digimon, basically mini breeding areas across the board. And that's Security Control really does struggle in that aspect, because you don't build wide enough. I mean, if you can't hit the tamers, you're not really getting rid of any threats on the board, and then you're just going to Digivolve up one, swing. Oh, it died. Okay, Digivolve the next one, swing, dies. Oh, okay, Digivolve the next one, swing. Oh, it died. Okay, swing, Digivolve next one, boom, done. It's just like, it's going to keep hitting the security, and all it needs is to build up 6 tamers, or just like 5 tamers, 1 raising area. Boom, promote, swing in 1, Digivolve 1, swing in 1, Digivolve 1, swing in 1, Digivolve 1. Then you're just going to start clearing out security. They're going to clear out the security way too easily. Your threats don't matter as much. Even if you put in a bunch of recoveries, just buying you time. So keep that in mind. Let's talk about it. Jesmon definitely got a major boost in this set, and I think it's a little bit better. It's up here, but it's still Brickmon. The problem comes down to it's still going to have its bricks in major events. Best of 1 style, it is more consistent than not. You're banking on a coin flip of who bricks and who doesn't, and Jesmon's still very much an OTK deck. It just, with Sistermon Awakens and the new Huckmon being able to filter out, I feel like it's still tier 1 viable. It just, massive long game tournaments won't make it matter as much. I think there's just some points in the game where it just struggles a little bit, and it just will. Let's talk about the next one. We're going to talk about Gabu. We're going to talk about Agu Bonds. Agu Bonds sadly just starts falling on the wayside here, and it struggles a little bit. I think it's low, top tier 3, maybe bottom tier 2. There's nothing it can do against tamer focused decks. It's highly tamer focused meta. You're not going to do anything with this card, because what are you going to pop? Tamers? Because Agubon and Bravery isn't going to hit anything. So keep that in mind, that it does struggle a bit that way. So just realize that. We're going to talk about it. The Azulamon Hexablaumon deck. Definitely, without Ice Wall, the deck already was suffering. It would have been a high tier 2 contender, but I feel like it's low tier 2 contender now. It still has the OTK potential, but now it doesn't get most of its effects. Actually, to be honest with you, with the tamer viability this time around, the Zulamon really can't do much. If I'm starting to start thinking about it more, is that Azulamon really does need you to have a board presence. Your cards don't really have effects if you don't have a mon on the board, and if you're building up a wall, you're just, I mean, tamer wall, it doesn't matter. You're just going to win that way, and your opponent's just going to struggle trying to take you out. So Azulamon really does struggle this one. Then we have Bonds. Bonds of Friendship, still competitively viable. I think it's still going to see play. People are going to play it because it is an Agu Bonds, and if they're movie fans and stuff like that, you're definitely going to see it. And it still does what it does. It's going to OTK. It's a little bit faster on its legs. It might struggle a bit depending on the matchups, but everybody's playing such a very different play style. It's still aggro, and that might give you the advantage you need. Titanmon with the Eismons actually does a little bit better this time around. I think Titanmon, with the ability to OTK, well, take out 4 securities on his own swings if you have the Black War Growlmon underneath it, really does help out a lot. But also having the access to the Eismons now, you can build board presence while also getting rid of cards, drawing deeper and stuff like that. It just helps out a lot. I think the Eismons really do help purple out extremely well this format, and it'll keep it in the tier 2 range, tier 1 range. Let's talk about Bellastar. Bellastar is very interesting. Yes, red had gotten pretty much the removal spell option it needed to handle her, as I would say she is low tier 1, high tier 2. I think I'm going to put her tier 2 right now. And that's the only reason why is because she gained the Eyes Bonds. If you want to add that, you have the Silver Bullet in the new red Three Musketeer that rewinds everything Three Musketeer back to the bottom of your deck. And that's huge. I mean, it does have silver bullets in the format in red, and red is still a very prominent, dominant deck going forwards in this format. So keep that in mind, that Bellastar is really good. It's going to be a good control because it's going to be Eismon, Bellastar. Now you're digging faster, discarding more cards. I think it's viable, but we're going to have to see what it can do. I feel like even with the nerfs and stuff like that, it can definitely start taking into tier 1 still and holding its place, but we're going to have to see. We have Emperor Greymon, Ancient Greymon. So this combo deck is really nasty. I think it's a little bit better than Jessamon, but Jessamon's still the MVP. Why play anything else but Jessamon kind of status in most formats? But at least with Emperor Greymon in it, you're going to have a better time, especially because Ancient Greymon will clear out 3 security on his own, maybe 4 depending on your stack, and then you're going to just, if it dies, once it dies, Analog Evo Rest, boom, you get out your Ancient Greymon for a Blitz game win. Really, I mean, not Ancient Greymon, Emperor Greymon for a Blitz game win, which is huge for us. So I think red is, people will probably shift over to this because they're not going to be having fun with Jessamon. The blue deck, aka stun deck, it definitely got neutered with Ice Wall. It now struggles a bit, but I think it still has the ability to remove sources, and which makes it a better version deck, because as long as you can keep your opponent at bay and freeze them out and stop them from playing, it really does some damage. But with the minusing of Ice Wall, it's going to be tough. I think he's a gatekeeper deck. To be honest with you, he's going to gatekeep the tier 2 decks in line, because most of the tier 2 decks are based around having sources or ability to swing in. So if you can shut that down, you're really going to be in a very positive situation. Then we have Blue Hybrid, which is slightly different than, you know, the stun deck, which focused on removing sources and guaranteeing. This one is definitely a very powerful deck in its own right. I think we're going to put it here at the end of it. I think the stun variant is still viable going forwards, even though with one Ice Wall. But you also have Magna Garurumon Ancient Hybrid, which plays very almost similarly, but it focuses on comboing and stuff like that. So keep that in mind. We'll talk about these more and more in depth. Then we have the security control variant of Hybrid Yellow. Hybrid Yellow, very interestingly, does a very 180 flip here. Yes, you could probably match them up with Shine Greymon and being this, but I feel like this deck is definitely high tier 1 status just because it's got the recovery aspect. You can splash purple in it to right now to have more removal, especially if you use the purple Kyrie with Charizard or whatever, the purple option that for every tamer you have on board. And hybrid, you now destroy your opponent's Digimon up to that many, so for level 5 or lower, so it can board wipe very easily, and it's a very powerful option. So I feel like that's where that's going to sit, and I really do agree that with the recovery package that it has, Jet Sylphimon is just such a powerful ultimate, and you can climb up to any mega very easily because Jet Sylphimon just wants to do on top of Zoe or a hybrid line and stuff like that. Just keep that in mind. Then we have Gotcha. Green Gotcha is very interesting in this format. I think it's not as powerful as it should be. You're trying to play this weird janky deck yes, it can combo off and go crazy, and I'm not dissing this deck's ability. It has some working around that it needs. It needs like a very powerful gotcha system type boss monster. I mean, yeah, you can Nidhogg top, wipe a board if that was possible. I mean, if we had, I mean, you could gotcha into Argomon on top. I mean, there's a lot of ways around it. I feel like it's still going to struggle, but somebody's going to prove me wrong, and I'm really excited when they do. Let's talk about it. We have D-Brigade slash Dark Nightmon. This deck, to be honest with you, now has finally gotten the top end it's needed, and that's a viable top end too. Dark Nightmon is very powerful because you're going to use Deadly Axemon plus Nightmon, Skull Nightmon, boom, fusion into Dark Nightmon, and now you have a very powerful boss monster. And if it dies, congratulations, you're playing them both back out from its sources. That's huge for this deck, being able to now have a very powerful top end, and with the new option that lets you mill and play for a 4 cost with delay, really a very viable card for this deck. There's not many decks that can just say, I'm gonna be able to play a Mega Digimon, level 5 Digimon very easily for free, and then be able to, like, well, it died, hey, congratulations, pop goes the weasel, come out 2 more pieces. It's like, okay, I just killed 1 resource, now I have to get rid of 2 more. And that's huge for this deck. And then the Commandramon, D-Brigade, Onslaught that's chipping away at you, well, this thing is another threat. It's like you have to threat choose, and it really gets scary as quickly as this deck can get. I feel like it's really good this time around with a very powerful top end. Especially you can go into Dark Dramon if you feel like it, just in case. I mean, why would you? I really don't know. If you go into it, good on you, but I don't recommend it. Then we have the X Antibody deck. I think it is a tier 2 deck at the moment. I don't think it's going to pop tier 1, but I feel like it's kind of like a neck and neck here. It's like either one of these can be swapped, but I feel like this is a very solid place to put it. And it's really good because X Antibody has good removal, it's got good consistency, and it's just a very powerful deck. And you're not going to regret playing this deck. And even going into the sets forwards, you're going to have better and better support. You get 3 sets in a row, more support for the X Antibody decks, and I'm excited to see what you guys can do with it. Let's talk about it. Cherubimon. Cherubimon is awesome, or Purple Hybrid for short. I love that Purple Hybrid is a thing, and it's a very powerful deck. Being able to use Tamers to your advantage, trash Tamers now come back into play, and it's just all around consistency incarnate. It does struggle a bit, so I think tier 2 is going to be its home. It's a slower version of everything else, and it's like everybody else is a little bit faster than this, and I don't understand why they didn't just power level everybody equally with the hybrids. All the hybrids 1 level power, but hey, it's Bandai, and you know, that's how they want to go about it. Eosmon definitely got a new support card, and it's not enough to get this deck off the ground. It will still be playable, and I think some locals you can top with it, and it really depends on the locals and how badly the other decks brick, but that's where you're going to be facing it. Imperial Dramon is a ticking time bomb. If we had the starter decks, instantly, boom, right up here. No questions asked. But without the starter decks here, I think, and with the Ice Wall nerf, you're really going to be struggling just a tad bit. But I feel like you're about here, and to be honest with you, it's going to be nuts if I'm not putting this a little bit closer here. I started putting more in front of that. I shouldn't have. But Imperial Dramon still does the whole OTK with jamming. Jamming is still very powerful. I mean, it's not as consistent against hybrid decks because you're just hitting Tamers anyway, and they're just coming out. And then you're just feeling them for a counter whack. So just keep that in mind. We have Diaboromon. Diaboromon's very interesting. I wouldn't call it a tier 1 deck, and I wouldn't call it 1.5. I would call it around here. It's yes, everybody slowed down a bit, so now you build wider blocker boards, but most decks don't care about your blockers now. Either they're going to clear it out, or they're just going to go straight for the throat. So that's kind of what it's about, because they have piercing, they have always around of, oh, my blocker's here. Well, it doesn't matter, I'm just going to swing in and just deal damage anyway. So just keep that in mind, that Diaboromon is going to struggle a bit, even though it was a blocker wall. It definitely would check normally against Deeper Babe. So I would say about there. I mean, like I said, this is very much my opinion, but Diaboromon is still a strong tier 2 deck. It just didn't get any more support, and it needs some more support for consistency fix. With Machinedramon's very interesting, actually. I think he's a tier 3, tier 2 deck here. I think he's kind of the end game here. So I'm going to put it high, just because Machinedramon got new support, and now you have access to using Kaiser Nail and all these nice goodies that you didn't have at first. So I think this is a great spot to put Machinedramon at, so that you have a very well-rounded theme. What do you guys think of my tier list? I know that I went into a decent amount of it. I think this is kind of the format. A lot of decks started phasing out at this point because they just couldn't keep up. Well, they couldn't deal enough damage for the hybrids to not say, I don't care what you're doing. So that's like the big thing, is like the hybrids just went like, you can just swing in all you want. As long as I have tamers, I'm going to have resources, and eventually I'm going to have a bigger tamer status than you. So deal with it. I think this is a great way of segmenting into them. And what do you guys think of the tier list? Let me know down in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace!